He was never meant to lead, not in the eyes of the world, not in the shadows of legends. He was a memory, a myth, a mistake carried forward by war. They gave him a name, then took it away, turned him into something unrecognizable, and when he came back, they looked away. He never asked for redemption. He earned it, not with words, but with silence, not with promises, but with presence. He didn't return to be seen. He returned to make things right. And every step he took was uphill, through history, through judgment, through echoes of who he used to be. They saw the arm before the man, the weapon before the will, the ghost before the growth, and yet he stood, steady in a world that called him broken, unshaken in a system that buried him alive. He never begged for forgiveness. He simply fought for a future he wasn't sure he deserved. He carried more than any title could contain. The weight of choices he never made, the pain of lives he never meant to take, and the courage to live with it anyway. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's not trauma. That's transformation. While others rose with applause, he rose in silence. And in that silence, he found strength deeper than serum, more grounded than any suit. His leadership was quiet, careful, carved from sacrifice. And that's exactly why it mattered. In this video, we're going to explore why Bucky Barnes deserved to lead the Avengers. Not because of what he lost, but because of what he became. We'll look past the myth of heroism, past the symbols, past the noise, and uncover how experience, pain, and perseverance made him the one leader the world never saw coming, but always needed. There was a time when Bucky Barnes was nothing more than a shadow, a man erased, rewritten, forgotten by the world he once protected. He came back, not with applause, but with blood on his hands, not by choice, but by force. But in that return, something rare emerged. A soldier with no allegiance, a weapon stripped of purpose, searching for meaning in a world that barely remembered him. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a witness to everything the world pretends to forget. He walked through decades of war, through corridors of guilt and silence, through nightmares that didn't end when he woke up. He was more than a man out of time. He was a man outside of mercy, and yet he kept going. He had every reason to vanish, to fade into legend, to disappear into myth. But he didn't. He stayed, not to be forgiven, but to earn his place, not to be celebrated, but to carry something forward. And maybe, just maybe, that is exactly why he should have led, because he knew what it meant to be lost, and still choose to lead anyway. They chose others, not because they were better, but because they were easier, because their stories were simpler, their pasts more palatable, their pain more marketable. Bucky wasn't clean, and in a world obsessed with image that made him disposable, he wasn't the poster boy, he wasn't the speechmaker, he wasn't the symbol you put on a billboard. But leadership isn't about optics, it's about endurance. And no one endured more than Bucky Barnes. They gave him therapy, they gave him missions, they gave him silence, but they never gave him trust. Not truly, not fully. They wanted the Winter Soldier gone, but they never gave the man a real chance to replace him. Bucky had knowledge no one else carried, empathy no one else could fake, and scars that turned into instinct. He didn't need the suit, he didn't need the spotlight, he needed the opportunity, and it never came. And still, he served, he fought. He showed up when it mattered, because that's what leaders do, even when the world refuses to see them. There is something haunting in watching a man try to atone for things he didn't choose. Bucky didn't write his past. He endured it. He wasn't evil. He was used, and then discarded by the very hands that shaped him. And yet, the weight of those sins still sits on his shoulders like a chain no one else can see. He carried guilt like armor, not to protect himself, but to keep others safe. Every step forward felt like betrayal. Every smile felt unearned. Every breath felt borrowed. And still, he moved. Because to stop moving meant accepting that the pain defined him. He lost time. He lost friends. He lost pieces of himself he'll never recover. And every time he rebuilt, the world reminded him of what he used to be, never what he could become. Each memory he tried to bury clawed its way back, louder than the future he was trying to build. There was no parade for his return, no headlines for his redemption. Only silence, only judgment, only the heavy echo of a world that forgives, louder than it listens. The same people who cheered for others turned their backs when it was his turn to rise. And that silence, that weight, that unspoken pain, is exactly why he understood leadership more deeply than anyone else. Because true leadership isn't loud. It's forged in the quiet places where no one claps. Bucky stood on the edge of history, a relic of a forgotten war, a remnant of a broken promise. And somehow, he didn't shatter. He sharpened. He didn't collapse under the pressure. He adapted. Because resilience isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn through survival. He trained with the best, fought beside legends, bled for people who never knew his name. His reflexes were built in fire, his judgment carved from loss. Every decision he made came from experience, not ego. His instincts weren't just skill, they were memory etched into muscle. He didn't lead with words, he led with presence. He didn't demand loyalty, he earned it, not by standing above others, but by standing beside them, again and again. He proved that action without ego carries more power than speeches ever will. He saw the worst of humanity, and still chose to protect it. He walked through every failure, every betrayal, every battlefield, and came out not invincible, but unbreakable, because his strength wasn't in his arm, it was in his refusal to give up on a world that gave up on him. And in a universe filled with gods and giants, it was the quiet strength of Bucky Barnes that stood tallest, because the strongest ones are never the loudest. They're the ones who carry the weight without letting it crush them. There was always a better future buried inside him, not the kind wrapped in glory, but in growth. He didn't seek leadership, he embodied it, through every act of restraint, every gesture of patience, every moment he could have run and didn't. He kept choosing healing, even when it was the hardest thing to do. He understood the cost of violence, the power of peace, the weight of consequence, and unlike so many others, he didn't run from it, he carried it. He made it a part of him, not a chain, but a compass, and that compass pointed not to redemption, but to responsibility. Imagine a world where Bucky led the Avengers, not because he was chosen, but because he chose himself. A world where redemption wasn't hidden, but honored, where pain wasn't punished, but transformed. That world might have been quieter, but it would have been stronger. He had the wisdom of age, the heart of a soldier, and the soul of someone who had nothing left to prove, only something left to protect. And in that protection, a new kind of strength emerged, one that didn't seek to conquer, but to preserve what little light was left. Because leadership isn't about power, it's about presence, and Bucky's presence could have changed everything. Not with command, but with clarity, with compassion, with conviction that never needed applause. But the world never asked what he could offer, it only remembered what he was. And in that remembering, it forgot who he became. They handed the torch to men with shinier stories, because Bucky's truth was too heavy to hold, and no one wanted to carry that truth into the spotlight. He never got the title, never got the speech, never got the moment, and maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that he wasn't capable, but that we weren't ready to be led by someone so real. We feared the reflection he gave us, because it didn't come with fantasy, it came with flaws. Here was the cautionary tale, when he should have been the guide, the memory when he should have been the mission. He was sidelined, not by weakness, but by discomfort, because his story asked us to look deeper than we wanted to. And looking deeper meant confronting our own definition of what makes a hero. And even now, his legacy is whispered, not shouted. His journey is studied, but never celebrated. His heart was steady. His hands were open, but no one reached back. Because it's easier to build statues of the perfect than to follow the broken who rebuilt themselves. Bucky Barnes didn't need the shield to lead. He needed a world brave enough to follow, and it never came. And in that silence, we lost the leader we never knew we needed.